Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Karen Salpe. If someone offered to donate a laptop computer for every student in your local school, what would you say? You wouldn't even have to think twice, right? Well, our guest today is going to ask some questions that might make you think otherwise. Join me on Inner Compass and fasten your seatbelts.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is Clifford Stoll, an MSNBC commentator, lecturer, and a Berkeley astronomer. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Cuckoo's Egg, and Silicon Snake Oil, Second Thoughts on the Information Highway. His most recent book is High-Tech Heretic. Welcome, Cliff.
I'm tickled to be here.
You've been a computer user and a programmer and a systems administrator.
Why is it that whenever we talk about why is it that when you have a drug addict and somebody who uses a computer,
we call
them both users?
That's right.
How come?
You're a recovering user, aren't you?
But what is it about that?
Well, that gets us into what we want to talk about. Cliff is worried about computer users. Cliff is worried about computer uses. You're not someone who's afraid of something he doesn't understand. You know this beast.
Yeah,
what are you worried
I've
about?
used computers a long time. I've paid my dues.
What are you worried about?
My concern is, what do we lose when we log in? What happens to me when I'm online? Yeah, I'm not worried about, oh, how much does it cost, or do I have enough gigabytes spinning around the hard drive? I'm not worried about, oh, is the bandwidth enough? What I'm wondering is, why is it that after I'm online long enough, I start to think that my brain is turning to putty?
I know that.
Why is it that I have the stack of incoming email, and every time I glance at it, I feel guilty because they all want answers? Why is it that the internet is promoted as this wonderful fountain of knowledge that'll do wonderful things, but it's not doing wonderful things to me? So what I'm asking myself is, might it be that computers are a bit oversold? Might it be that the internet does a lot less than it's promoted to?
It's being especially promoted right now for schools. There are whole schools, colleges, middle schools even, that are purchasing computers for every student. Why are they doing that?
Oh, it's going to solve the problem of education. You know, right now it's expensive to hire a real teacher. It's expensive to get somebody to stand up in front of classes and lecture and speak and get kids, sixth graders, interested in the subject. It's hard to get high school students to concentrate on their studies. So we'll give them all laptop computers, and that'll solve the problem, because kids will suddenly see this animated cartoon character sitting over there on their laptop and jumping around talking and doing all these cool things, and then they'll be inspired and they'll become industrial chemists. Or better yet, these sixth graders will log onto the internet, go to a website, and they'll suddenly become fascinated by Shakespeare, and they'll want to learn. They'll develop a lust for learning just because they have a laptop computer.
You sound a little bit skeptical.
It's a fraud, of course.
Well, what's not happening?
Quality learning has nothing to do with the instant gratification that we get from the internet. Quality learning requires commitment. Commitment from a teacher and a student, and commitment from both of them to a subject matter. Quality learning requires a sense of discipline. You have to do your own homework. Quality learning requires responsibility. It requires work. There's no fun, snappy, easy way to get a good education.
Can't you work hard using a computer, though?
Of course you can. But to me, what I remember from my schooling is not the subjects that I learned, but rather the relationships that I developed with my teachers. What's the most important thing in the classroom? A teacher and a student. And anything that separates them, anything that brings the teacher away from the student, whether it's a film strip, an instructional movie, an educational video, a high-speed bandwidth computer, a CD-ROM-based instructional system, anything that separates a teacher from a student is going to be great fun for the kids, because it'll give them a chance to avoid grappling with a tough subject. So they'll love it, but it'll be of dubious educational benefit.
James Garfield, President Garfield said a long time ago that the ideal university education was his professor, Mark Hopkins, sitting on one end of a log and a student sitting on the other end.
Yeah.
You like that idea?
What do I need when I'm teaching physics in a classroom? Well, it's nice to have a chalkboard and a piece of chalk, but the main thing I want when I'm teaching is a student that's curious, enthusiastic, creative, and a student that has diligence and an attention span.
Do you think computers...
I don't care if they have 10 megabytes of blittity-blitz laying around. In fact, when I think about it, all the things that computers contribute to the classroom, it works against a long attention span, it works against creativity, it works against original thought, it works against a disciplined approach to study.
Can you talk about how that's so? How do computers prevent students from learning or developing creativity and originality?
Well, suppose you wanted to eliminate creativity. Well, the best possible way is make sure you give your students an overdose of information.
You said in your lecture at Calvin that the quickest way to squelch creativity was to answer a question immediately.
Sure. Whenever you have a question, oh, what's under the stone? Make sure there's a little sign over the stone saying, oh, there's sand under this one. Or under here, look, there's a snake that's under this one.
So then
Pretty
there's
soon
no
you
reason
won't
to
turn over
explore.
the stone. You'll say, hey, I'm not curious about it. That's what the internet's doing. If I ask the valid question, why is the sky blue? Or why is it dark at night? Well, I can look that up on the internet, get a quick, facile, immediate answer. But it's much more important to work it out myself.
Years ago, I used to teach poetry to high school students, and we would have these exercises in which they were supposed to try to figure out how the poet had finished the line, what was the most effective poetic way to finish the line. And when I first started teaching, I didn't have a teacher's manual for the book, and I honestly didn't know the right answers. And my kids would fight and argue to the death. And about 3-4 years into it, I got the answer book, and they lost interest in the whole conversation. Today, I think it would be impossible to use that book because they could just type the line into a search engine and find the answer.
Or, in physics, it's real easy to look up online a set of physics questions and pop in, get answers. What's important, though, is to develop your own rubric, your own way of understanding this, of solving the problem, and then to solve it yourself. I'm less interested in the student getting the right canonical answer, the one that everybody agrees is right. No, what I want is for a student to get their own answer. In first grade, I don't care. The classic question in first grade is, what does 3 plus 4 equal?
Right.
Well, there's an obvious answer, 7. That's boring. I think the correct answer to the question, 7 plus 3 equals, is it's not worth answering. The right question is, what does 7 equal? Hey, that's a good question. 7 equals the square root of 49. 7 equals 12 minus 5. 7 equals the number of days in a week. 7 equals the number of samurai.
Doesn't a classroom get out of control pretty quickly when you have that much creativity?
Yeah. Well, no, that's what you want. The number of samurai in Kurosawa's best movie. The number of ancient monuments. What does 7 equal? 7 equals the number of deadly sins, which were?
The deadly sins?
Yes.
Sin, avarice, pride.
Sin, avarice?
Wait a minute. Oh, now you got me
Pride,
stuck.
avarice,
pride, sloth. I used to have a mnemonic for this. I can't remember, but I'll
Pride,
go look it up
avarice,
on my
sloth.
computer
Come
as soon
on.
as the show's
Good.
over. Pride, avarice, sloth, envy. I'm going to ask you another question, and I'll be off the hook.
So what I'm getting at is here's a question that can touch on any number of subjects that you can ask even in first grade, and you could ask in graduate school. But asking but it's a question that you can't get a computer to answer for you.
Right.
If you look it up on a search engine, what does 7 equal? The answer will be meaningless. But it's something that every student can come up with a creative new answer. And they can argue about it and fight about it, and you'll learn something about it. The student that says the answer is, Siebensachen, the 7 bags in German, they're going to have a whole different approach to this than the student that says, what does 7 equal, why 7 equals...
Sounds like it'd be a lot easier for a teacher to have a computer in the classroom.
It's way easy.
It's limiting.
One nice thing about computers is they are parent pleasers. Parents think that because their kids are using a computer, oh, my kid must be smart, they must be learning something. In fact, why don't we just give the kids television sets and say, here, watch TV. Well, a lot of classrooms have TVs in them.
Right.
And a lot of teachers say, hey, I'm taking time off this period. I'll show them a videotape of the rainforest and call that a lesson. It's a fraud, of course. It's a shortcut not to a better education. It's a shortcut to a lousy education.
But are you being unfair here? Most of us don't have the money to take our kids to the rainforest to see it firsthand.
Of course not. We shouldn't take our kids to the rainforest. My response is the rainforest is not important. If you live, say, in Grand Rapids, perhaps the place where you ought to be taking your kids is not talking about the Amazon rainforest, but the clear cuts a little bit north of here. Maybe you should be saying, hey, maybe it's more memorable to take a field trip up to the Upper Peninsula and see what is growing there. Or maybe we should say, hey, instead of doing that, let's visit a closed down steel factory and ask ourselves, what went wrong here and what was right here.
So you're saying let's learn about the world that we live in right here and now. Let's experience that world.
Think locally and act locally.
Aren't there things, though, aren't there just some boring things you have to learn, like your times tables? I mean, don't we need certain basic fundamentals?
Of course there is.
Can we
and
do
for
that with
times
computers?
tables, there's wonderful magical computer programs that will, in theory, teach you the times table. One of them I remember is Math Blaster. You shoot down these funny UFOs labeled 2, 4, 6, and 8, zip, ding, ding, and you blast them out. And this is supposed to teach you multiplication because next to the side you have to get the right answer. It's a fraud, of course. It's the same as, remember the old flashcards?
Sure.
It's the same as flashcards.
What's wrong with flashcards?
Nothing's wrong with them, but consider the difference between this computer program and flashcards. In the computer program, the subtext, the Untertext, is to say, my child, it's important for you to learn arithmetic. It's so important that I've bought this $500 computer and this $29 CD software package. Here, go play Math Blaster for the next half hour. I'll see you in 30 minutes. With the flashcards, what you're telling a child
I'll
is,
be there with you.
I'm going to be there with you. Learning math is so important that I, your teacher, I, your parent, I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes playing the flashcard game with you, even though I already know the answer. Of course, a really good teacher isn't going to use either of these tools. A really good teacher is going to teach multiplication by saying, oh, hey, here's a dozen eggs over here. Let's see. Oh, yeah, they're arranged in groups like this. Let's fool around with them. And over here, hey, there's a cluster of cookies. Let's make cookies. Oh, better make it a double batch today.
Which is what we do on computers, except virtually, and we don't get to eat the cookies.
We don't get to eat the cookies, and
or
the
break
reward,
the eggs.
And the reward is entirely virtual. It's not I made these cookies, and because I multiplied it right, everything turned out. Instead of using 2.5 cups of flour, I had to use 5 cups of flour, right? And so it worked out.
Yeah.
And I had to put 2 bags of chocolate chips in, not 1. It's real rather than fictional.
You talk about computers as a kind of Faustian bargain. What do we lose? What do we give up for the sake of maybe the immediate gratification? I know when I win a computer game, the screen flashes and congratulates me and makes me feel really good, so I want to play again right away.
But how much better is it to play a real game of Monopoly
with a real
against
person.
somebody? Hey, you spent all Saturday afternoon,
Right.
and eventually somebody went bankrupt.
Right.
You see the smile on somebody's face, you get a feeling of, hey, I've just spent 3 hours fooling around with somebody.
With a person.
With a human being.
It's not
We've
till
developed
later.
a deeper relationship
right.
with another person. The computer game, who are we playing against? Ourselves? A computer game maker? Where's that at? It's a wonderful way to further isolate ourselves, to remove our brains from interacting with humankind.
You have a vision of learning, of what should go on in a classroom that's not at all limited to just mastering facts. There's more to it.
It seems to me that a quality education, you need to know facts, you need to learn them, but a quality education goes beyond just facts. It means to develop a relationship, to find somebody, to find a way to actually see somebody, meet them, touch them, be close to them, and then remember this relationship throughout a pedagogical experience.
Right.
That without being close to somebody, without, I don't want to say breaking rules, but without being with someone, all you can do is remember facts. But I don't want to think back to my English 101 and say, oh yeah, I remember that was Macbeth and there was a soliloquy. Yeah, I remember soliloquies. No, when I think of English 101, I want to remember that teacher that showed up almost sober one Thursday morning. And man, he did this terrific imitation, saying, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day.
Who was the teacher that got you excited about astronomy, Cliff?
Ernst Both,
And
Buffalo Museum of Science.
How did he do it?
He sure didn't do it by saying, here, look on this website. He sure didn't do it by saying, oh, go over and check this book out. No. I spent an evening at the telescope and we were looking at the moon. He started talking about craters on the moon. I said, there can't be craters and mountains on the moon. He said, sure are, check it out. I did. And he said, come back tomorrow night and it'll look different. Sure enough, I did. He brought me back again and again. And then one summer he said, you know, I can't pay you, but if you want to hang around here all summer, you can work in the solar astronomy lab. And I bicycled to the Buffalo Museum of Science Monday through Friday for one full summer, learned a huge amount about spectroheliographs and solar flares and sunspots.
I don't know what a spectroheliograph is, but I'm guessing that it requires some technology.
Everything requires technology. How can you live without technology?
How do you make choices in your life? Do your kids use computers?
No.
You have young kids. They don't use computers. They're not
7-year-old, a 9-year-old. We have no TV in our home.
No TV?
No VCR, no DVD, no. We have a telephone, an answering machine, and a doorbell.
It sounds
And
to me like
it's
those
not
kids
like-
are culturally deprived, except
Oh,
that I
they're
remember the most fascinating kid in my high school was a kid who never watched TV.
Here's
And I've known students
My
at
two
Calvin,
kids.
a group of students at Calvin who said, no, we don't have TV because it keeps us from doing interesting things together.
it's not like my kids are leading this deprived or depraved life because they don't have TV. My daughter, early on, learned that there was this magic way of handling people who did watch TV.
What's that?
She figured it out. Something that I figured out a while too. When somebody comes up to you talking about, oh, did you see the latest Blittity-Blit movie? She says, why no. Could you tell me about it? This other person says, yeah, I got to tell you. Oh, you know, they zipped over and blah, blah, blah. In other words, she learned how to just listen and ask questions. It's real handy not to have already seen it, because if somebody comes up to you and says, did you see the latest blah, blah, blah movie? And you say, oh, yeah, I saw it already.
Conversation's over.
Yeah, dead end.
Yeah.
In other words, there's even an advantage to not having all this, because, hey, your kids will
Learn other
have
ways.
other ways to get along.
I use computers, especially the internet, with my students right now, less than I did at first, but now more for communication. My students meet twice a week. In between, I can be in
What
touch
is there
with them.
that you do as a teacher that doesn't fall in the category of communication?
Not much. But
Is communication
but the computer
improved or made
facilitates
worse?
that. It's improved.
Facilitates. I love that word,
Yes,
facilitates.
I know. I'm a facilitator. In this case, it improves my level of
sure it
communication with
improves?
students. Yes, because
Why?
it's 2 in the morning while I'm sound asleep that my student has a question about his paper thesis, and we may need to go back and forth 4 or 5 times between classes so that I can ask him questions about his topic, so that we can get close to where we want to be. If I were to have each of those students traipsing across campus every 20 minutes while they're going through this mental process, or calling me on the phone
In
while they're
that
going
case,
through this
they
mental
might,
process.
if that happened, they might learn disciplined learning techniques that go sort of like, hey, get all your ducks in a row before you knock on the professor's door.
But can you confine creativity that way?
Can you
What
confine?
if you have a good idea at 2 in the morning?
I have lots of good ideas at 2 in the morning. And if I know that it's the kind of idea that's volatile and won't hang around, I usually use a pencil.
Hey,
but
what's that?
You know,
Yeah,
there's this thing that, you can just write down
He's got his lecture notes on here. Yeah.
on your hand.
Right.
At 2 in the morning it even works. You don't even have to look at it. You can sort of write by. And if it's something that's desperately important, why, there's a pad of paper. Moreover, what I've found is making myself accessible by email 24 hours a day means that I get a huge number of irrelevant queries. I'm not just talking about mailing list garbage that shows
Right.
up, but people asking questions that, had they spent another 30 seconds on, they could
Thinking
have
about,
easily answered for themselves, rather than leaning on me
But
by
doesn't
way of
that
the
happen
internet.
face to face too?
Surely.
Don't we have a lot of sort of pointless conversation while we're trying to think of things to say?
Yeah, but you're not.
Still fun, huh?
So,
How, given that most schools have got some kind of computer sitting around in the classrooms, your book actually has a couple of neat ideas for using the old ones. You've made an aquarium out of your old
Yeah,
Mac.
doorstop,
Kitty litter box, which I thought was kind of neat. But what about the ones that are in fact still functional? Are there ways that you could see computers being useful in the classroom in limited ways?
I claim that computers are extremely useful in the classroom, just as a television set is very useful in the classroom. What it does, though, is it changes the ecology of the classroom.
That's an
And
interesting
the way
word.
it changes it is in a peculiar way. It biases the classroom in favor of teaching certain subjects and away from certain others. Obvious example, hey, if your computer there's rainforest blitzity-blitz on it, so you'll see lots of pictures of rainforest animals. But it will bias you against going on a field trip down the block. It'll bias you automatically from talking to the 80-year-old person in the elder hostel 5 houses down the street, because you'll be there saying, I can do my research on the computer, rather than walking down the block to the elder hostel and talking to somebody in person.
One of the stories I remember most vividly is that you talk about a little girl who was studying magnets in school and having a really hard time understanding the concept of magnets. Parents found out that there were no real magnets in the classroom because they might damage the computer.
Oh, sure.
Parents went out and
First
bought a
thing with-
magnet for the kid, and suddenly it all made
Can
sense.
you imagine kids teaching magnetism in 2nd grade without having magnets? But it happens because, hey, this will destroy the monitor, or
Right.
erase the disk. Or beyond that, there's this inability. Well, computers aren't very compatible with the life of young kids. The ingredients of a 7-year-old kid's life are sand, mud, peanut butter, cut fingers,
Mushy things.
mushy things, rubber balls, bouncing
you're right.
things.
So why are kids even at that age so attracted to computers?
Oh, sure, they're attracted to it, but what happens when the kid's laptop gets
Well, they
gets
get
some
the
peanut
sand
butter
in the
it?
laptop. Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's
Why do you think they're so addictive? I mean, even for little kids,
well,
they'll sit in front of them for
computers
hours.
have been designed by programmers, by programming committees. Computer games and educational software has been designed to be addictive. Far more designed than any designer drug has been. No, this stuff is, if it, test it out on 5 kids, see if they like it. If they don't play it for 5 hours, they only play it for an hour, let's see if we can tweak it so they'll play it for 5 hours steady. That's what a successful software product is, something that is maximally addictive. Of course, they like to call it successful, same thing. Is this what we want our children to be doing? Asking it another way, is the problem in elementary schools, is the problem in high school that our children don't see enough TV, that our kids don't have enough screen time with their heads pasted against the
Right.
screen? Is the problem that our kids have too long of an attention span? Is the problem confronting our children that they read too many books, that they have too high of a respect for authority figures and teachers? Is the problem that our children have that they are never hyperactive and they just slouch. They just like to sit in their chairs paying attention for long periods of time. If those are the problems, then by all means,
Use
bring
computers to fix
computers
them.
in the classroom.
Cliff, I think I'm going to try to figure out how to work this thing. We're out of time
Why?
already.
Why?
I think the computer says so. My guest today has been Clifford Stoll, author of the book High Tech Heretic, Reflections of a Computer Contrarian. Thanks so much for your time. Come back and visit us again.
Sure.
Thank you for watching Inner Compass.